Hi everyone, I'm Amy Dick. I'm really glad that you are watching this video or attending this event tonight, and I wanted to share with you my story. Parts of my story are harder for me to share and some of them are easier, but I think it's really helpful because I believe that art is really, it's for me at least, really pivotal and really important, just using it to get through life, to help me understand life. And so I think art and life can intermingle in a really beautiful, interesting way. And so I wanted to prepare this talk for you to show you in what ways art has influenced my life and impacted it, and in which ways my life has directly influenced the kind of art that I made and how beautiful it can be when they come together. Many of you that know me will know that I've gone through some different health crises in my life. And the one that I'm going to be referring to during this talk it kicked in 2017, so it's been about 4 years since it really kicked in, and it was a bit of a mess. I took some antibiotics, and the antibiotics just for some other situation, and they triggered a whole array of symptoms that I had before, but I've never had in this way before. So next thing I knew, I was in bed, and I was shaky, and I was weak, and I felt really like I had the flu, so I had like a lot of body ache, and it was but the most drastic symptom was that I lost my ability to walk. So I was in a wheelchair for a lot of the time. Sometimes I can walk a little bit, but mostly, like, whenever I left the house or whenever I tried to get out maybe more than a few steps, I would crumble and not be able to walk. So as you might imagine, it can really change a person's life when they lose their ability to move, and in more ways than I think people realize. What I started doing is I started to move towards art as a way of expressing what I was going through. So it helped me to kind of get it out instead of just carrying it. It also helped me to I used art to help me understand it. So I'd kind of try different ideas, and it's almost like it was like a therapy where I kind of found different words, except for their images, to understand what was happening and to think about it in different ways. And I also used art as a way to kind of create for myself what I needed in the world. So there are times when I needed to approach things differently or look differently at myself, and I used art as a way to kind of practice that. And so this presentation is me sharing with you the artwork that I made in the process, and trying to make those connections between why I made it and how life impacted the artwork that I made, and how the art actually helped me move through the difficult thing that I was dealing with. So the first grouping of work that I made, I'm now calling Facing Monsters, and it was birthed out of my anxiety and fears for what was happening to me. The first piece that I made was this image here, and it's an image of a girl in front of these three kind of ambiguous monsters. I think there's a lot to be said about just having a way to express our fears, our feelings that are inside of us, the things that we're wondering or not sure about. And art for me has been an incredibly powerful tool in just processing what's happening, so it doesn't all just get jammed up, inside. So because this was like a disease or an illness of some sort that I didn't have a name for, but it came from, at least it felt like it came from me versus, a car accident or something that was external, it was more internal. I was processing this idea that, the monster that I was facing was also me. It was also part of who I was, and what do I do with that? So I was trying to understand what that meant and what it looked like. So I took some time and I created this other portrait, and this portrait was sort of this monstrous version of myself, this kind of mixed up, broken, surprising, not without dignity still, but also strange. Here, the next one is another monstrous picture where I was just playing, and what I love about this one is that it makes me smile every time, and I realized that art for me, even though it can be really serious, there's also this playful element that I've kind of latched onto that's become a bit of a lifeline. I was able to pull in something that was kind of funny and humorous for me to have this image of this blobby, feathery, monstrous creature with arms. It made me smile, and I thought, you know what? Even if I feel this way, even if there's something in me in this piece, there's also some humor in me, and there's also something to laugh at, and isn't that worth doing at the same time? Around this time, I created a new series that I decided to call Dwell. The thing that I realized and that I had to learn is that my experience wasn't going, it was staying. And at least at that time, and I had to figure out how to actually live my life while I was in the middle of this experience. So the series here that I call Dwell is a collection of work that explores what it meant for me to learn how to live in or be present with the suffering that I was experiencing. It explores issues like the role of acceptance and hope and fear in living with difficulty that just isn't leaving. What I started to do is I started to draw with charcoal, because I'm mainly a figurative artist up till this point. We'll see how it goes. But so I started to draw the figure, like parts of the figure. So I started to draw the face and hands, maybe the feet, and started to use those pieces of the figure and cut them out and collage them. Hope is a really complicated experience, and people think that hope is generally better. And I think what I learned in this process is that hope is not always a better way to live. It's not always essential to have hope as much that hope in the idea that maybe something will improve, and sometimes it's actually important just to be able to hold on to the moment and be present. There's so much more to people, you know. There's hopes and dreams and fears, and there's their past, and there's that kind of urge, you know, the instincts that maybe make them want to do things or not want to do things or hide. There's the parts that are maybe complicated and wrestle with themselves. And so this work was my exploration of those different layers that are all kind of woven up into the same person. And this last piece I've called Voices. And in this time I was wrestling with the different sort of the shoulds and the things that I felt like I should be able to do and I needed to do, and the kind of the critical voices that I think many of us have in our heads, and what those voices were doing when I internalized them, how I felt. I needed to acknowledge that these voices were not maybe mine. These voices were kind of circling around, and by creating artwork where I was able to envision them as not me, but kind of different voices kind of around me, I was able to decide whether or not I would listen to those voices. It's very much about my internal struggles or my internal journeys, but by putting them out on paper, it felt really, really helpful because it helped me to feel seen, if only by myself. So art for me is incredibly powerful in just helping me to see clearly what's happening, or at least start to see clearly, start to understand what's me, what isn't, what I want, what I don't want. So I use this work and this body of work called Dwell as a way of kind of understanding how I wanted to be in my body, and even just starting to see what I was wrestling with in ways that made it easier for me to decide what I wanted to do about it. Because the resisting didn't make it go away. You know, there was trying to fight it didn't stop it. So I could still try to learn how to improve, and I could still try to get the proper medications, and I could still take my medicine, but I wasn't able to make it go away by fighting it all the time. And so this work was my way of practicing being in my body in the midst of the struggle, and learning to accept what was. And art for me is just such a powerful way of practicing what it is that I want. The third series I want to bring up to you today is called Embrace. And this was a series that it was a really small series, but it's one when like I'd mentioned in my last image was about these voices, and I was feeling very critical and anxious and stressed, and I had learned through some good amount of therapy that I needed to learn how to be kinder to myself, to have some compassion, but I didn't know how to do that. It's not a thing that came naturally to me. So I decided in the process to create work that was practicing what I was trying to integrate. So I created this work here. The woman that's featured in the middle there is maybe unsure how she feels about it, or is kind of new to this experience, but I've got the different layers, about 3 different layers of self that are represented in this painting. It's about a 16-inch, I think it's 16 by 20. Just by painting this piece, I was practicing that kindness and compassion, and it helped me learn how to do it myself. This next piece is a bit of an extension on the other one, in that if you ever want to see the beautiful nature of humans, the way that people come together, and love and kindness, you get really sick really fast in a really drastic way. And so I was able to have the front row seat to the best of humanity. The people were so generous. People that I didn't even know personally were driving my kids to school, and my neighbors were stepping up. I've got people dropping off food, people helping me to pay medical bills. Not even all the people that I even knew were helping me pay my medical bills. And so I was blown away by the support and the love that I found from people that, of course, already loved me, but also the people that didn't. And just being able to see, because we all see the worst of humanity, but we can see it in the news any day you want. And it was really, really beautiful for me to get to see the best at the same time. It was such a privilege. So this piece was a representation to me of what it felt like to be carried by my community. So I've got a figure in the middle, and around that figure, these blue hand-like, wave-like things. And for me, waves, so the water and the waves are one of the most calming, comforting things I can experience. And so something about these hands and the water, the connection to water, felt really meaningful to me. The next series I want to point out was later on in my journey. So I'd been sick for, I don't know how long it had actually been by this time, maybe a couple years, and still wrestling. And I hadn't really made as much progress as I wanted to make. I was still in the wheelchair a lot of the time. I could walk around my house probably by this time. My house is very small, so that wasn't a huge accomplishment, but I could walk around. The pain had lessened, the other symptoms had kind of decreased, but I was learning, just like before, I was reinforcing this idea that I had to still be in this, and I was moving through something, and I didn't know how long I would be in it for. I had hoped at this point that I could shift out of it, but I also knew that I wouldn't be the same after having finished it. I had experienced too much, and I found it really interesting that these things that come that we resist so much, so these sort of interruptions, I'll call them, that might be something really bad that we fight really hard to not have happen. They can, the cliche is they make or break us, right? And so for me, I was curious what happened if they didn't break us, what they would make us into. And so I created this body of work that I called Emergence. And it's about that experience, or I guess that question of me trying to understand how a person can incorporate these difficulties into our life, how it shifts us. In some ways it's about acceptance of what is, but it's also about transformation. It's about becoming, and it's about evolution, how I believe these things can help us to evolve into different versions of ourselves. And it doesn't always mean that I'm not going to jump in and say that they're always better, but I think they make us different, and that difference can be better, or it can be more complex, or it can be more interesting. So I've got these sort of abstract forms. They've often come and interrupted this figure in some way. You'll see these figures changed by this abstract sort of unknown thing that's kind of attached to them. And in here, some of these pieces are about 22 inches tall, and some of them are actually about 8 by 10, so they're quite a lot smaller. And I was just trying to explore visually what it could mean, to have this sort of part, this new part that's interrupted. Does it change entirely who the person is? Does it add? Sometimes these difficult things like traumas can make you really, really good at seeing things in ways that other people have never seen before, that you didn't see, so that you're kind of more attuned than maybe you would have been, and that can be a blessing too. And so I was exploring how some of these things change us and make us more. This last body of work I've called Dichotomy. So here is a collection of the works, and most of these are actually, they started off as collages. This collection of work references aspects of the figure's depth, her vulnerability, her strength, and they hold a lot of tension and contradiction. So at this point, I was still I was still sick, but I was further in, and I think I had already done my treatment. So I had this really intense treatment that I did for a period of time, and it made me quite sick because the treatment, sometimes the medicine can be quite difficult, and so it made me very sick, and I had to recover from the treatment after I had taken the treatment to recover from the problem in the first place. And so this work was trying to learning how to hold that contrast between, you know, getting sick to get better, and also just the contrast that I had to carry. You know, I was holding on to the sort of the playfulness, but also the fear. I was holding on to the sort of the softness and even the fragility, but also in contrast with the strength and the fierceness that I needed to have to kind of get through this. And it was also in some ways a direct rebellion to the impulse to flatten a person, to kind of that one thing. You know, we'll often look at people just instinctively. I think it's just part of human nature to kind of look at a person and say, well, you are this, you are that, and you are that. And we don't kind of look at them long enough and get to know them well enough to understand the depth of all the things that might be in a person, and how maybe that one thing that you can see about them doesn't define them. I wanted to explore that with this work, and I also wanted to explore how those different parts that make up a person can also be in tension with each other. You know, they're not all one big unified kind of happy family. There's sort of this kind of tense kind of thing that can happen where we kind of, all the parts of ourselves, you know, the ones that people see and the ones that they don't see, kind of somehow we kind of work together and kind of move through life as sort of one big unit. And it's a bit of a miracle to me that we can even do that, you know. And I found that by making these collages and then moving them into paintings, which I did these some of them as larger paintings as well. It helped me to really start to see and appreciate the different parts of me that maybe were more hidden before this process. But these pieces had more order than before. They weren't just, they weren't as monstrous either. I'd learned kind of what this disease was. I learned how to manage to an extent, and I learned what treatments I needed and what my prognosis was and what to expect going forward. And so the fear wasn't there. And so I was really just exploring what it meant to go through the world in this space and how to be. So especially here in this one, I've got this I call it the Holy Mother, and it's this image of this woman, and I was learning again, or I was expressing this thing that I was learning about how we're never going to be perfect. We're never kind of going to get there. At least I certainly didn't appear to be. So I've got this figure who's a bit of a mess. You know, she's got her, you know, parts of her legs are kind of there, parts of them aren't. There's too many of them. It's a bit confusing. There's lines, there's form, it's flat, it's round, what is it? But then she's got this sort of this dignity to her and this integrity that I think she's holding as she's here. And there's this kind of halo around her, sort of hinting at this kind of holiness as is, you know, this sort of good enough. I thought it was really valuable to show you how the life shifted the work and how the work has become really meaningful to me in the process. I'm grateful to have been able to express things I've been able to express through my work, and it's really helped. Being able to have that has helped me to see my journey in a new way, and I think in some ways to, I guess, milk it for all it's worth. You know, if you're going to go through hell, you might as well get something out of it, right? So for me, this work has been my way of trying to get something out of it, and it's not just about getting the art out of it, it's also about getting a deeper understanding of myself and what it means to be human, a deeper understanding of the people around me, of compassion and grace and love and acceptance. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope that this is inspiring in some way. I wanted to point out that I think art is powerful, not just for the maker. I think that, and I've been told this by many different people, that the art that I make sometimes expresses things that they're experiencing that they maybe didn't think or know how to put visually. And so I think art is incredibly powerful in its ability to help us feel seen and feel heard and be understood, and to see that other people are like us and other people have similar experiences. It also just helps us to get stuff out. And I think because of this ability, it's a powerful tool for connection. It brings us together with other people. And for me, I've experienced that with art a lot, is that when I make art and other people connect to the work, we have this connection as well. I see them, they see me, and it feels like I'm contributing in a meaningful way to the collective good.